Welcome to this new edition of the Lumínica Temporal Talks. We have a special guest today. She's one of the top lighting designers for both Europe and the US. Paule Constable. She's an associate director of the National Theatre, and she has designed productions for all the major UK companies, including Warhorse and the Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night, both at the National Theatre and worldwide. Her opera designs have been seen all over the world and include Julius Caesar and Billy Budd at the Glyndebourne, Medea at ENG, Ariadne of the Vienna Stand Opera, plus Satyagrahana at the Metropolitan Opera. She's an associate of the Matthew Burns Company and designed Romeo and Juliet, The Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, The Red Shoes, Dorian Gray, and The Play Without Words for him. Recently, productions include The Ocean at the End of the Lane, Follies and Angels in America of the National Theatre. She has received 5 Oliver Awards, 2 Tony Awards, the Helpman Award, and numerous Critics' Circles and Drama Desk Awards. And she designed the new Les Miserables and both the 25th anniversary and the West End concert version of the same title. Thank you for being here with us today. That was a long introduction. I mean, you have a lot of awards and a lot of years of expertise, so I had to name it. We're very happy to be with you today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Sophia.
We were saying before we start the interview that for the three of us, Leah, Luciana, and I, this is an exciting opportunity. We studied lighting design in college, and we saw videos and pictures of your shows so many times. So you're basically part of our education somehow.
I hope I didn't teach you bad habits. I'm very honored, Sophia. I really am. It's amazing to think that in Argentina, it's, my work's known. So that's a gorgeous thing to know. So thank you.
Yes, I mean, I remember doing homework for some classes back in, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and just Googling lighting designers all over the world and watching the pictures of the Warhorse show. And I was amazed. And I watched them yesterday prepare for the interview again. And I was like, how is this done? How this can happen? This magic, this atmosphere, everything. So I'm very glad that you're here with us and you can talk and I can ask you some questions that I had for so many years. I think the first question will be, let's talk, I talked about the beginning of my career 2 seconds ago. I would like to know the beginning of your career. Why lighting? How that happened?
Well, it's funny, Sophia, because you were saying that you started studying lighting when you were 18. And when I was 18, I didn't know that lighting design existed. I had absolutely no idea. We have a system in the UK where you're supposed to be an arts person or a science person. And you're not. So when you sort of are finishing off your schooling, you're supposed to decide which sort of camp you sit in. And I always found that I was very comfortable in both. I've got I love the arts, and I did lots of painting and making, and I loved literature. But at the same time, I loved particularly physics and maths and quite logical thinking. So everybody was going, you've got to be an engineer or an architect. And I was like, that sounds really boring. So I ended up actually doing an English degree, I went to London, to the University of London, and studied English. And so I had no idea about theatre. I'd done a bit at school and I'd quite liked it, and I'd sort of painted scenery and things, always backstage. But I'd really never considered that it was an option as a profession. And when I was in my first year at university, the person I shared a flat with was an ex-stage manager from Guildhall, which is one of the big conservatoires in London. And she had a summer job working on a musical as a follows operator. And this is really 100 years ago, so there's no mobile phones, no emails, nothing. Anyway, the beginning of the summer holidays came, and she fell madly in love and ran away and went to Spain with this guy she'd met. And she didn't tell them. So they phoned the flat that we shared one day and said, could you tell Jackie that she's due at the Hackney Empire at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning? And I had no money and no job, and I still don't know why I did it to this day. I just went, yep. And I turned up the next day and I pretended to be her. And walked in through stage door. It's like they go upstairs. So I went up to this in these days, this theatre was very derelict. And fortunately, the other follow spot operator was a woman. And that's unusual enough now, but back then it was incredibly unusual. I had to go over to her and say, I've got absolutely no idea what I'm doing and I'm not Jackie, which she thought was hilarious. Anyway, she talked me down and I worked on this show and earned a bit of money, paid my rent through the summer. But it was a rock and roll musical, and the company had put the show into this theatre. It was all kind of trussing, and I had always done lots of climbing, and I was very happy working on things like that. So I sort of joined in and helped out a bit and really enjoyed it. So they sort of, while I was doing my academic studies in English literature, this company took me on as a sort of apprentice. So I sort of trained really by working in the sort of events and music industry while I was still a student, and absolutely loved it, but loved it from a technical point of view. And I worked as a rigger and a lampy. And then I started to discover there was this thing called lighting design, and these people who sort of brought together this idea of this world of working with light, but also with ideas. And so for me, that suddenly was bringing these two things in my life, this kind of creative impulse that I had, and this technical kind of problem solving sort of side of my brain. And it just was all sort of there in front of me. And I was like, wow, I've never known this was possible. So I always laugh that I didn't become a lighting designer. Lighting design discovered me, essentially. So that's a long story, but that's how it happened.
I think it's really interesting how, I have a really direct way to go into lighting, right? I mean, I finished high school and I was in the same position that you were, like in a lot of math, but at the same time, art history. So everyone thought that I was going to pursue architecture as well. But somehow lighting has this appealing that you don't know what might happen, but it's magical somehow, because even if you know all the technique behind it, when you arrive on the stage and when you turn the lights on, it's not the technique anymore. It's the atmosphere and it's the magic of the situation. Every time I saw pictures of your shows and videos of your shows, I used to ask how did you arrive to that moment? And I would like to ask you, when you're facing a new lighting design, how is your creation process? How do you go through it?
I think the process of making work, I think it's a really hard thing to articulate, isn't it? But certainly for me, the decision about what work I take on is the first point when I'm making a kind of creating a kind of conversation between me and a show. I sort of really feel that I have to have a relationship with the work that you're putting on. I've never really done, lots of quite successful lighting designers go into a bit of architecture or a bit of museum design and things like that. But I really love live theatre, and I really love lighting that kind of works from the inside out. I love spending time in rehearsal. I love all my shows are sort of long conversations. So when you look at something like Warhorse, Ray, who's the set and costume designer on Warhorse, she and I have been working together since 1989, since before you were put, it's ridiculous. So I think that the decision about whether you feel you have a piece in you or not is really critical, and something that needs you to kind of investigate early on. I also never felt that I was doing shows because it was the next thing I should do. Oh, it's great to be asked by these people or these people. I always stayed with my own peers and colleagues because I felt that way I could find safe spaces to grow as a designer and be able to take more risks. So I think really important to me is the decision about what work I do. And then that obviously involves having a relationship with the material and feeling that that's important and engaging and something I'm interested in bringing to life. And then I do quite a lot of research. So I tend to leave a director and designer to kind of decide how they want to tell the story. Are they setting it in a room? Is it an open space? Is it, all those the kind of way that they want to tell the story, I leave them to kind of do. And then I think as a designer, I'm very much reacting to that. So I look at, wanting to set Don Giovanni on the moon, and I'll kind of come and look at that and interrogate that and just ask that really simple question of what makes light come into the room, and when it comes into the room, what's it there to do? Because I think those simple questions are different for every show. So I believe in sort of breaking it down, and I think those questions can tell you everything you need to know that you carry with you for the rest of making that show. So is it something where lighting is, you mentioned a show like Ocean at the End of the Lane that I just did. That's a kind of Neil Gaiman fantasy piece that we made for young people. But it's a composite design. So it's a design, the set doesn't move, and yet the story moves every 2-3 minutes. It's a different scene, a different place, a different space. Every change in that space has to be made by the lighting, as opposed to looking at a show that might be set in a house, in a room, or be very scenically driven, like the scenery is changing and I'm responding to the scenery changing. All those really simple questions. It's deciding sort of essentially what the rules are and what the quality of light is. And then I watch rehearsals, and then I mix all those things together and produce the work I produce. I think the thing that I'm really interested in is finding the essence of something. So finding the simplest, most honest way for the lighting to be in that piece. That's why I love asking all those questions, because you learn a lot about what it's not, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think it's like a cleaning process. You have this whole bunch of ideas, and then you try which piece is part of the puzzle of the play, and then you have to clean everything that is not to.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to let things go and willing to realize that ideas might just be ideas, that you've got to keep interrogating your ideas. I mean, the thing that we all know is hardest for us is that we don't get to test our ideas. We get that, an actor can rehearse and a costume designer can have fittings and a set designer creates a model. Sound designer can make sound that can be played in rehearsals. We might have the odd light we can add, and we might also be able to sort of try particular ideas, but the actual alchemy of being in a space and bringing it to life with light we do in those last 2 or 3 days. So all of those questions we're asking ourselves are sort of in our heads, aren't they?
Yeah, it's true. It's weird when you think that in theater we work with light without seeing the light until the end of the process.
Yeah.
So we can say that we work with imaginary light almost.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I think it's really important to keep asking yourself why it's there and what it's doing. Because at least if you understand that, you understand what you can work quickly, and you go, the light in this scene is doing this, and it's this light doing that. That's my theory. And then you can test your theory when you're in the tech, but you've got a really good solid theory to work from.
And regarding this theory, we all have limitations while we're working. Sometimes it's the budget, sometimes it's the time, sometimes it's something else. In your experience, what are the limitations or the limits that you usually face when you're designing for a production?
Well, I think it's all of those things. I think it's budget. I think it's time. I think it's, all those things like, is a show in one space? Has it got to move? How quickly it's got to move? What the resources are for it to, how it's going to go from one place to another. Are you taking the lights with you? Are you recreating the work with whatever lights are provided where you're moving to? When I was starting out, I did lots of shows where I was relighting shows for lighting designers. So they'd be in one venue and I'd learn the show, and then I'd go to the next venue and try and achieve the closest version I could, which was quite a kind of, I think it was a really good thing to do as a young designer, to kind of constantly have to create these images and these quite specific ideas, but with vastly different equipment. You quite quickly learned, what you could hold on to and what you had to let go. But I think all of those things are there as, being able to deliver your vision, and for your vision to be one that fits the brief. That's why I think we're designers, not artists, because we have to work to a brief. There's no point in having absolutely amazing ideas and it being so expensive you can't achieve it, or it's not physically possible to do what you're asking to do. It's, that all feels a waste. And that's why I feel I slightly bristle when people say, but you're an artist. And I go, I'm not an artist. I'm a designer. I work to a very particular brief and I deliver something relative to these confines. I mean, what would you consider yourself, an artist or a designer?
I think it's depends. I also do light art. So when I'm doing light art piece, I think I might not consider an artist yet, but it might go in that line. But it is true that when I'm working with a company, I have this precise timeline, and I have these precise set skills that I have to use and to develop. So I wouldn't consider an artist while I'm designing for a show. But I think it's a particular profession that we're into, because some people might think that we're just technicians. And even if the technical part is very important, because without it we are not able to do anything, to accomplish anything, I think the ability to create a concept and to be able to put it on stage is the main key of the lighting design profession.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's enormously creative. I think to articulate it as design over art is not to deny it being creative. And I think that thing we were talking about before, about how little an opportunity we have to test our ideas or our theories, there's a massive leap of faith, isn't there, when you step into the technical and you've got no time and you've committed to what you think will work. But actually, it's not until you start turning those first few lights on that you get any sense of whether the show is really in there. And that's the word I use a lot is alchemy, which is, the old-fashioned word for when they were trying to make gold with different chemicals. And of course, you can't. Gold is gold. But there is an alchemy. There's a kind of magic about it that you just can't test until you're in there. And that's terrifying and really creative, because it's also a leap of faith. So I would never underestimate the creativity of what we do.
And you said that you have this whole set of questions that you ask yourself when you're designing. Of course, you have an outcome that is on the show, and I would like to know if you think or if you know that, or if you would say at least that you have your own aesthetic or style through your designs.
I definitely think I have, and I think that's partly to do with developing a process that gives me space to be creative. So asking myself those questions, I have this, I really don't like it when light is arbitrary, when it's just something that's stuck on top. I think there's always, I was listening to a friend of mine who's a choreographer talking the other day, and she was saying, the thing about the movement is it's all there. You just put the gas underneath it and it bubbles out. And I sort of feel that lighting's like that. I feel that you have all these ideas and this kind of palette of like, I think this is going to be this, and this is going to be this and that. And it's sort of, you start a cue and you put for me, quite often with a cue, I'll only start with one light because I really like to strip something down to its essence and then see what it does. So you turn that light on and then you hear the words, or you see the performer, or you see something moving, and it starts to become something. And it is like you're putting the gas underneath it. It's revealing itself to you in a way. So I think I've created a process where I give something the space to do that. I think also, there are really simple things like I love backlight. I like thick light. I like light that is very, if it's appropriate for the piece, that is. I like light that is present and active. I think the thing about lighting is that you're participating in storytelling in the same way that an actor is, or anything else is. You're as important as the word, but like everything in theatre, all of those different elements come together to make something. And I'm offering the kind of creative lighting part of that conversation. And there are shows where I need to be very, very present in that conversation, and shows when I need to sit back and let the show, like the other elements, lead. You never quite know. It's a bit like a relay race. But I do think, I think I'm not frightened of lighting being very participatory in that conversation. And I think that partly comes from working quite a lot in opera, where everything is in extremis. So, emotions are extreme, quite often design is extreme. And with lighting, it's like you've got to meet that extremity and find the essence of something in that extremity. So like you were saying earlier, it's like getting rid of stuff, making it a big, simple gesture. And also the great thing about big, bold, simple gestures is that people fall in love with them. So it's easier to sell them to a director because they're like, that awful thing when you're starting out and you put too much light in from the front, for example, everything comes to look like mud. So I always go, just start with the beautiful big gestures. Don't put any fill in. let everybody learn to love that, and then just slowly add the tiniest bit of fill as you need it. And also things like if somebody's not bright enough in a picture that you're making, the first thing to do is to take light away, not to add light. It's about focus, and it's about constantly trying to kind of strip things back to a really pure essence of something, I suppose, is what my style is. That, and being front foot and present in the conversation. So hence work like Warhorse, where you go, you know, that every moment is breathed alive through light, but the light is the architecture of the piece. So everything is defined by lighting. If you'd sat back and just gone, oh, I'll just do a little bit of this or a little bit of that, it would have just dissolved. It would have been like sand between your fingers. It wouldn't have been a thing.
And I know this question is not on the script, but I would like to know if you have like one show. I think it might change through the time, but if you have one show that you can say, okay, here I developed the deepest of the concept that I have about light. Or
I think I've been thinking a lot about that in the pandemic, and I don't know whether this is happening in your industry, but here there's been a real realization about how many things have to change in our industry. There's lots of questions around the death of George Floyd and trying to be more inclusive and more diverse. And there's a lot of questions about how people are paid, and 70% of the theatre industry here are freelance, and we've been really sort of ignored by what's happened, and they've supported buildings and administration rather than people who make work. So there's a lot of questions going on, and as we start to work again, it feels like there are way less resources. And it's made me think about the things I will miss from the world that I grew up in making work in. And the show for me that kind of sums that up is a show called Follies that I did at the National Theatre, partly because of the quality of the collaboration. It was designed by a woman called Vicky Mortimer, who's one of my closest friends and colleagues. And when I work with Vicky, and we've worked together for years, she's also one of my best friends in the world. And we just really encourage each other to take ideas and go so far with them. And I look at images from that show and I feel really sad, because I can't imagine a world where we'd be able to do that again. Mm. So it does make me realize that there's something about the qualities in that show that I did feel that I achieved something. Most shows I walk away from going that 40% of that was okay and the rest was a bit, could have been better. Follies, I think I got 60% of it okay. So that was exciting and rare. And it's also, Follies is a Stephen Sondheim musical about a group of women revisiting the theatre that they worked in when they were young. Now they're old. And I just think it's funny that the characters in Follies are very much my age, sort of in their mid-50s. So I sort of think it felt very personal to me as well, and made me think a lot about my career and my time in working in the theatre. So to lose that as well, it feels a really good point of reference for, I could quite happily make that the last show I ever did. It's not, because I'm still working, but it feels like I achieved that, and that was achieving something. But it's hard, isn't it? I mean, how do you feel about when you walk away from shows and how you've done?
I think I have these few shows that I feel like they had something special happening, that is not just the lighting, but also like the chemistry between all the elements on stage. Of course, I have some shows that I'm like, I really don't want to do ever again what I did before. It was a mistake, but I did it. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about a process where you do a lot of rejecting, is I did do that recently with a director who's quite controlling, who I hadn't worked with before. And they definitely wanted to see that process and control that process themselves. So when we arrived in the theatre and I'd made a kind of really stripped back response to the scenic design, the play, and the development of the play, they were like, well, I want to try it like this. And I'm like, well, that's not up there. And it's not, because I know that's not what the design is, and therefore I haven't done that. And they were like, but I want to decide that. And I'm like, but my job is to start us, 25 steps further down the conversation, not to offer you a kind of paint box and go, oh, we could light it from the front, we could light it from the side, we could light it from behind, we could put the rig here, we can't do that. I have to make a design gesture in the space. That's what I spent the last 3-4 months working on. But learning that there are people who appreciate or understand or need collaboration of the sort that we're talking about is really important, because there are also people that you're not the right casting to work with. I when you ask if I think my design has, if I have, a style or something, I think one of the things about my style is I'm really collaborative, and I will have opinions, and I want to work with people with opinions. So there are some people, some directors, you just go, it would be a terrible idea for me to work with you. Have you ever had that?
I understand that situation very well. I don't have many years of experience that you have, but I think I crossed path with some people that are like, no, let's stay like friends, but no, don't work together ever again.
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't been good for me, and it hasn't been good for you. So should we just agree that it's not good?
Yeah, we're not a good match.
No, you just find me really irritating, and you just like me to go away and turn the lights on.
And I think the next question is, it's not that focused on the design, but just the thing between light and technology. I think lighting and theatrical technology and lighting technology has evolved so much in the last decades. And do you think that these changes has made an impact in the way that the conception of the lighting has been created, or that do you feel that the conception of the design has also evolved or changed in the recent times?
If I'm completely honest, when I talk about stripped back design and trying to find the essence of something, I think my taste, for several reasons, is for things that are very simple and bold. And when I talk about, I think there are two ways of approaching lighting. I think one is to try and find this truth, this kind of essence of something working from the inside. And I think there's a way when you put light onto something. And I think the majority of rock and roll and event lighting is very like that it's kind of bold and impressive, and it's about stuff. I'm not so interested in the stuff. I think there are tools that have really made our lives different. I think the introduction of better LED engines, so the Lustre 2, the Lustre 3, I think they're interesting units. And now that we have LEDs that can dim really beautifully and kind of almost have a kind of tungsten-esque quality to them if we want them, but also have other qualities as well. I think there are exciting things, but I think I do see a lot of work that I think is celebrating technology for technology's sake. And I also think that one of the things that draws me to light is that it's really precious. So I constantly, when I'm making a show, go back to dark. I always work in tracking. I always work with big blocks. I get rid of everything, so that every time I'm making an image, I'm working from a point of darkness. And that's partly because I think that the nature of what light can do is very precious. So I tend to do things that are quite simple. I don't really want to do things where lights are just on and off doing all of this stuff for the sake of the stuff. So that's just not my way of approaching it. So technology is a tool in the same way that burnt ochre is a tool if you're a painter. But I think lots of people are drawn to lighting because of the technology rather than because of light. And the thing I love is light. And it's a really, really precious and beautiful commodity, particularly in, with the climate crisis going on and all of this. It's so much more important. We just got to celebrate that simple, beautiful thing that we work with. And we don't need lots of it to make it extraordinary and beautiful and welcoming. So, yeah. But there are also things that you think, oh, that's great, I love using that. Or that. But so often the LED story was so interesting because when they first came into our lives, they were terrible and really, clunky, and the fades were all over the place, and the colours that you could mix felt really, fine for some shows, but for many shows just didn't feel right. And it feels like those companies like ETC and people have really listened to us going, we need this tool, but we need it to have more subtlety. We need it to be able to breathe. So much theatre is about breathing, isn't it? Like how an audience breathes as they're watching, listening. Are they kind of excited? Are they stimulated? Are they leaning in? Are they holding their breath? And I think we need light that can do all of those things.
Yeah, I think I have a very close opinion to yours.
Oh, that's nice. And I also think it's really important, Sophia, that, that other world of lighting, I worry about it from a sustainability point of view, but if there's a moment where you have to take the lid off something and do something ridiculous, we can all find that in ourselves to do it, but and to be over the top or whatever it is. But we do it knowing that that's what we're doing rather than thinking that makes us feel like we're lighting.
I know, I totally understand. I think when I'm part of a generation of people that doesn't draw by hand anymore. Most of my generation of lighting designers, they only do renders. And I think one of the main decisions that we took on the studio was just not to do renders for the earliest stage of the project and leave it until the end when we really need to do like calculations or angle things. And I used to work, I worked as a teacher assistant in the drawing signature of the lighting career. I think it's very beautiful when you're drawing by hand and you have the black paper and you start to draw with a white pencil. Because it's the same thing that you actually do when you're on the theater. You have everything black and then you start to turn the lights on. And if it's not right, then you can just dim it or turn it off again. And with the paper, you can do the same. And still, you're not trying to achieve an image that is exactly like it's going to be. I think the main thing with render works is like, if you show the render to a director, he or she might think that is going to look like that. And it is not true. A render is just a draw. It's a computer-based draw.
Yeah.
So when you're presenting your sketches by hand, there is no doubt that it's just an idea, a concept that you want to develop. So I think it's about finding the right moment to do the right thing. It's nothing wrong with renders. It's just not for every moment of the process.
No.
Like there's nothing wrong with the movie lighting. It's just not for every shot.
Yeah, yeah. It's treating it with care, isn't it?
Yeah. And you have worked in opera, theater, musicals. Is there any genre that you feel you're more comfortable with, or is any genre you would like to explore?
There's one genre I find really hard, and it's because I don't have a point of access to it, which is ballet, sort of traditional ballet. I find really, really difficult. I don't understand it, and so that's something I know I don't particularly engage with or pursue. I came from working in music, and then I worked very much in experimental theatre, and then moved into opera. I think my heart is probably in I used to say opera, but I think it's probably in theatre now. I think it kind of shifts from year to year. I never feel musical theatre I find quite difficult, because I find as soon as somebody starts singing, I want to know why. I'm like, something that's sung through like an opera, I understand, but when people talk to each other and then they start singing, I'm like, why are you saying that with a song as opposed to because you could just say it? I don't sort of understand. So I quite like Moulin Rouge, the film, for that reason. You know, it's kind of like, because it sort of plays with that idea. So I've done a few musicals, but also I need to do musicals which kind of have a kind of really strong dramaturgy around them, rather than a pictorial or moment based. So I do think it's theatre first and foremost. Partly also because I love text. But I think I'm really lucky to work in. I do a bit of dance with Matthew. You know, I do a bit of musical theatre. I do a lot of opera. I do a lot of drama. And a lot of designers here tend to do one or the other. So I feel really lucky that I do a bit of each, and I think I learn different things from each different form, and that sort of keeps you alive to the possibilities of what the others are. And people quite often ask me, you know, is there a difference? And actually, I don't think there is, whether it's experimental devised work or work with a play text or whatever, or work with music in it or whatever. I think it's still this. I still go through the same process. How you deliver it is different in terms of how you manage time, but essentially, it's the same. It's not like there's a different set of rules when you're lighting dancers to when you're lighting actors. Do you have a favourite?
I really don't know. I think I have a favorite shows that I did in different genres, because I think I learned something from those experiences. I really enjoy musicals, even if I haven't done that much. I did small musicals. Here in Argentina, it's not a genre that is really developed. We have more theater and experimental theater. That's a lot of experimental theater. So I think I did most of my works have been in experimental theater and small theaters. So I did very crazy things with light. I think I missed the part where I need to follow some rules. I would like to do. I did some operas, but I would like to do more operas, bigger ones.
Yeah.
I think that's
but it's interesting. It's interesting what you're saying, Sophia, about rules, because when you studied lighting design, did you study theatre lighting design in a conservatoire or something?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird career because it's a stage lighting design, so it's everything that can happen on the stage. So we have some subjects about dance, some subjects about ballet, some subjects about theater, but mostly focus theater, I think.
Because it's quite, I didn't have any academic training in terms of lighting design, but I do often think about how do you teach someone to be a lighting designer, because essentially what you're teaching them how to do is how to look. And that, so I think I wouldn't teach people how to look by drawing plans and sectioning things and doing 45-degree angle front of house. I'd do it by watching great movies or art history. Art history is probably one of the most useful things you can have a sort of knowledge of, I think, because you sort of know what you're reaching for in a way then, don't you? And you understand about composition and the kind of creation of images and quality that might communicate something to an audience. That feels way more important to me.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite subjects back in college was one that I really can't remember the name right now, but it was focused on the color theories by different authors. Nice. So it was about thinking the color from different perspectives and thinking the colors as an object, like get the object of color. But I think as a genre that I would like to explore, I would like to do something big in a big theater with a lot of people watching, or maybe a huge show with 2,000, 3,000 people. Yeah. Which is not really pandemic friendly right now.
No, but it makes.
And we're coming back to small shows for 5 people. But I would like to experience that feeling that a lot of people is watching the show, and what you just say like a few minutes ago, they are breathing with the light, and it's just everything is in sync. So I told you before that I did some light art, and I would like to know if you did some light art. In the past few years, in the last decade, it has been this explosion of light art as a thing, and the light art installation as a way to explore light from a different perspective. And I would like to know if you have experimented with this discipline in particular.
Not really. The sort of closest things that I've done, I've co-curated, sort of co-directed a couple of shows with a very good friend of mine, where I've sort of directed an experimental piece where light and word are very participatory, but they've been more sort of installations, both of which have related to a theatre, one of which an audience sat in a conventional theatre, the other of which we put the audience on stage, and the kind of lights and sound work happened in the auditorium. But that's the closest I've got. And I was commissioned by a dance company to make a piece which was with no dancers in it. So it was just light that was creating the dance. So I've done things like that, but they've still been performance pieces very much. I've never done something which has been objectified to that extent. I really enjoy that kind of work. I really, who can't love James Turrell or Dan Flavin, or, there's such, what I love is that when you see their work, you see so much of the conversation that we're having is happening in their work, and it's sort of really purified as well. We had a really fantastic exhibition in London about 10 years ago called Light Works in one of our major London galleries. And it was a collation of about 20 different pieces by different light artists from 1920 to present day. And it was so beautiful because it was exploring. So some of it was terrible. One of them was just like a source wall profile with a gobo in the shape of a splat on a white floor. And I was like, no, that's kind of ridiculous. But other ones, there was, of course, an Oliver Ellison piece. And that was just amazing. And it was water moving in strobe light. And there was a beautiful James Turrell piece. There was Dan Flavin. There was, just amazing. I should send you a link because the catalogue is one of the most beautiful things ever.
Please do.
Yeah, I will. I think you'll enjoy it.
It's here in Argentina, I think we don't have that much of light art pieces because it's quite expensive to do a light art piece. There is this bunch of younger artists that are starting to develop quite a taste of working with light as a main object of construction of a piece. I think it's quite interesting the way that light art has changed the game in the lighting design and theater lighting design the last time. I don't know if that happens to you, but I've been asked to use as main reference some Dan Flavin pieces to put on stage, or to try to recreate a James Turrell for a company. I think it's just working in both ways.
I think they're an amazing reference point because their light is so, it is the presence in them, isn't it? I mean, the James Turrell sky rooms are, the number of times that designers bring those as a reference is amazing. But it can generate really good conversation about what is actually happening, and what, you know, his ideas of kind of relative color temperatures and the shift of light. And there's a sky room here down in the West Country where we went to go and see them doing the shift from day into night, and there were just 10 people in this room, and we just spent 3-4 hours in there. So beautiful. I mean, it's just the most dynamic piece of lighting you'd ever seen, and it was, amazing. But I was actually with a sound designer when we went to see that, and that was it generated lots of really good conversation about relative values and shifts in space and perspective, and it's lovely.
Well, the next one is a little bit hard. The pandemic cut off all of guard. I think February 2020, we never thought we would face such a hard situation as we did last year, and that in some part of the world we're still dealing with it. And something that happened, I think, late 2020 was this question, like, did you reinvent yourself? Did you change the way you thought things? I think it's really, it will require such an effort not to rethink our life through this hard time. But on the profession, I would like to ask you if, profession-wise, did you think that you reinvent yourself during these changing and uncertain times?
I certainly did. As I explained earlier, the political situation as regards theatre workers in this country has been desperate. And I suppose, as somebody who's always spent my life believing that there is no problem so great you can't solve it with a better lighting cue, a better you know, one of the things we do as lighting designers is we solve problems, don't we? We help to sort of shift focus, we pull things, we're a malleable element in that last moment of making. So when this all happened and our government were ignoring us and we were being left without trace, I couldn't sit back and let that happen. I had to find the lighting cue that was going to make that better. So I spend a lot of time now talking to government and talking to industry bodies and advocating for freelancers. So I've sort of reinvented myself, I suppose, as somebody who engages with politics and advocacy and campaigning. But I also think in terms of work, the few shows I have made since I've come back to work have all been thematically linked to the pandemic. And I think when I see work that's kind of pretending that the pandemic hasn't happened, I find it really difficult to watch, because we are all different. And what I think theatre and what it can do in its purest form is really important in this moment of collective healing, because there's a lot of mental health problems. I'm sure it's the same in Argentina. We have huge amounts of mental health problems here. And I think we can be part of making that difference. But also over the last 20 years, theatre has come to define itself more and more as entertainment in this country. And I think for me, it's made me re-engage with the importance of the politics of making live work, live sharing, being in a shared space, shared experiences, and that we've all missed those. And a little bit like light itself, that the act of shared storytelling is incredibly precious. And I want to make work. I don't want to make work that's arrogant and confident. I want to make work that is feeling its way into what this new version of who we are is. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I think one of the main situations here in Argentina, I think, is similar to the UK. I think we were starting the 2020 season when the pandemic started. So we had 1 week of season of 2020. And I think I haven't come back to a theater yet because of the pandemic. But Leah and Luciana, they did. But this thing in the chest that I had June 2020.
Yeah.
Like it's never gonna be the same. And even if I go to work to a theater, I'm gonna have to think about 20 other things that I never had to think before. And this, I think we all had this feeling is something died last year.
Yeah.
Some way of thinking our world died. And I think we need to grieve that in order to create something new. But it's a process. So when this year everything seems to be the same, like we have a weird summer vacation here in Argentina. In Argentina, our summer vacation is January and February. When we were in January, everything seems like we were back in 2019. So everyone thought with the vaccine, everything will be solved and we will just get back on track if 2020 didn't exist. And then suddenly, when we were in March, we have another quarantine. And everything started to close again. So I think that made me hesitate. Like it's really going to happen. It's opening this year, maybe 2022, or 23. I don't know. But it made me question in a personal level if I want to wait to do things. And I think one thing that happened with lighting designers is that most of the time we wait to be called. We wait the production to happen to be called.
Yeah.
So I think I personally decided I don't want to wait. I want to be part of doing things because I want to do it. And this global situation led us to a point that everyone hesitates about doing or starting a creative process because every moment we can close again. So why would we start if we're going to stop in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So I think that's on a personal level what the most recent thoughts that I had. Like I don't want to wait to be called to do a lighting design. I'm going to be like more active to create theater.
Yeah, I mean, and that makes sense of working in light art as well, in that is something that doesn't require someone to be your boss and someone to be in control, and it's a very different and quite freeing. I can see what's really attractive about that, because you can be so much more in control of what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it, all of those things, and you're not brought in as a kind of last thought, one of the last things people think about.
Yeah, especially I don't know if you have this explosion of streaming performances back in the UK.
Yeah.
So, I think August last year we were having one of our meetings with Leah and Luciana, and we were talking about how suddenly everyone forgot that for doing a streaming you also need lighting.
Yeah. But also that it's all, it's all filmed on HD. It's got no depth of field. Part of me goes, I'll just do it with the workers on. Or get somebody else to do it, because it's not what I love live. I really do love live. And I think there's I think what will come out of this is kind of hybrids and different things, different formats of storytelling. But I think that's also for you and your generation to play with. I think, I am a dinosaur.
You're not.
But that's fine. But that's also fine. I think I'm not at a point in my life where I want to reinvent what I do. But I'm really happy to help other people reinvent it or look at it again, or and I do lots of mentoring and supporting, and I think that's, in a way, that's the most important thing for me to do at this point in my career.
Yeah.
But you're right, we have to be allowed to grieve.
Yeah. It's I think we didn't have the time to think about it either yet. It's too close. It just happened, and it's still happening. So
I think, people are dealing with the crisis as opposed to I think that's true of governments, and I think that all the thinking is incredibly short term, and that we are really going to pay the price for that.
Well,
dark days.
Yeah. Back into the brighter side of the talk. Just to end.
Yeah, let's try something positive.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you're currently working on? And is there something that we can watch on streaming? That I know it's always better to be back in the theater, but until we're able to travel to the UK or the US, is there something that we can watch? Or are you working?
I'm terrible about keeping an eye on what is streaming or not. The National Theatre do lots of NT live streaming. So lots of the shows I've done in the past, like Angels in America and Follies and Curious Incident and things, they're all available on streaming now. The shows I'm doing at the moment, I'm doing a play at the National Theatre in the Olivier, which is the big amphitheatre space, called The Normal Heart, which is a play that was written in the 80s about the AIDS epidemic in the States. And it's about political campaigning, which is quite interesting relative to what I've been doing recently. I'm doing a new piece for Matthew Bourne, a new dance show for him. Then I'm having to reopen lots of shows that used to be running. So Les Mis and Curious Incident and are reopening. And so that's, and then next year I'll be back in the States doing lots of things. I mean, but also whenever anything's coming in for me, I'm kind of looking at it going, I can't actually believe it's going to happen. It's so weird, isn't it? So it feels like a very precarious time. So I'm really happy to be working again a bit. And also the other thing that I've learned is I never want to be as busy as I was before. I think we were all on a kind of roller coaster, a treadmill. And I think while there have been so many awful things in the pandemic, one thing that it's made us all do is stop. And, everybody's question, and this is not undermining that question, but what are you doing next? We used to meet each other and go, hey, how are you? What are you doing? What are you doing next? And you kind of go, no, can we just stop at, hey, how are you? Because actually that's the important thing, isn't it? And we all define, I mean, I'm sure you felt this, Sophia, that, our industry, we're sort of defined by the work we do. And this has made us have a moment to breathe and to be ourselves rather than Sophia Acosta lighting designer or lighting designer Sophia Acosta, lighting designer Paule Constable. And we've just been Sophia and Paule, and I don't want to lose sight of being Paule. So I think that's been a real gift. So I've got lots of exciting projects, but I'm also really looking forward to trying to find a better life-work balance and trying to encourage more of your generation to do more bold and interesting things that I've had my period of bold and interesting.
Thanks. I would like to add that I recently saw last week that in Latin America, we can watch your show Red Shoes on Teatrix, which is like a Netflix for theater. So if everyone in Latin America, if you want to watch some of the most iconic Foley shows, Red Shoes, you can watch it on theater.
That's definitely one of my top 10 shows ever. I had such a lovely time doing it. So it's nice it's that show. I don't often watch anything that's streamed, so I've got no idea what it looks like on camera because it's always hard, isn't it? I watch 5 minutes.
It looks amazing. I can tell you it looks amazing. I'm sure it's not the same as being at the theater, but it looks incredible. It's
thank you, Sophia.
An amazing show.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun making that. There's a lot of trust in that show.
Well, this has been our interview. Thank you for being with us today again and for sharing this interview that is the celebration of our second anniversary here in the studio. We're very happy and glad to be talking to you and to actually get to meet you. I'm a fangirl right now. I'm fangirling you.
Congratulations on your 2 years, and thank you so much for asking me. It's been an honor. It's been lovely, and it's been lovely meeting you, Sophia. So thank you.
Well, thank you everyone that has been watching this interview. Of course, you can watch it on English and Spanish, and I think soon we will have more subtitles to everyone to enjoy this talk. And see you on the next one.